Hello? Hello?
You have to push something.
Hello? Yep, it works. I didn't change anything. They put it on. Hello, welcome. Let's hope we get a few more people to join, otherwise I'll have to speak really loud. And I have a bit of a sore throat. It's been a week of COP coldness and talking. So I am going to get started and I'll pass on, you know what, I might pass you this mic so you don't have to get up later unless you want to.
Thank you. Great to be here. Yes, so my name is... this is just a test. Okay. In any case, it's great to be here. So testing.
Good evening. I'm happy to be here. I think it is clear for me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Oh, good. So, welcome everyone. You're here for the carbon neutral and resilient agri-food systems that is organized by FAO, and we're just really thrilled to have you here at 6 p.m. on a Friday. That is commitment to the topic, so kudos. That is really, really impressive. My name is Clea Kaske-Cook. I'm Director for Policy, Advocacy and Business Mobilization at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. We are a CEO-led organization that focuses on the SDGs and the Paris Climate Agreement. I have been involved in this work through many years of my career and also asked to moderate this panel in my role as co-chair of the joint OECD-FAO advisory group on responsible business conduct and agricultural supply chains. As you might know, the way businesses operate and work and also have to positively influence supply chains is very, very important. However, the topic today is not about business conduct, although it might feature quite strongly. It is around carbon neutral and resilient agri-food systems. The topics of resiliency, food security, especially here in Egypt, and also linkages between the climate agenda and food are becoming increasingly connected. We have a wonderful group of speakers and panelists today. We will be starting with some opening remarks from Mrs. Anke Oppermann, who's the Deputy Director General at BMZ. So it's an honor to have you here. Then we have Mr. George Odingo, who's the Global Associate Director for Agriculture, Food Security and Livelihood, BRAC. George, thank you for joining us. We have Mrs. Eya Hiatavuo, and sorry if I mispronounce your name. It's your VP for Corporate Affairs at Tetra Pak, and we've had a few meetings already this week. So thank you for joining us, and I know you have a taxi to catch right after this. And then we also have, I think, joining us virtually, Mr. Pascal Liu. So thank you, Pascal, for being there. We can see you very well. And also, then we have Dr. Honest Kessie, who will be introducing the Resilient Local Food Supply Chains Alliance, joining us. So thank you, everybody, for being here. I should mention that Mr. Pascal Liu is Senior Economist at the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization, and Dr. Kessie is Director of National Food Security, Ministry of Agriculture and National Convener on Food Systems for the government of Tanzania. So a very diverse panel representing international organizations, government, as well as business. And I'm sorry if I spoke too loud. I'm figuring out the mic and trying to make my voice heard against the sound. With that context, I would like now to welcome Anke to the stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. And dear ladies and gentlemen, we live in times of crisis. Russia's war against Ukraine and several other conflicts around the world resulting in a food crisis. In addition, the climate crisis and the biodiversity crisis. In those crises, agriculture is both a source of emissions and biodiversity loss, but also at risk of climate change. According to FAO, approximately 31% of greenhouse gas emissions originate from the world's agri-food systems. In addition, the expansion of agriculture is responsible for 90% of deforestation, a major threat to biodiversity, as forests host about 80% of terrestrial biodiversity. On the other hand, agriculture suffers already from climate change and changing weather patterns. Against that background, we need joint efforts. Therefore, I'm happy to open this impressive panel, bringing together such a wide range of actors, expertise, experience, and action. And I'm happy to learn from you all. Let's share experiences and elaborate the next steps which need to be taken. BMZ, my ministry, strongly welcomes the numerous net zero targets of the private sector to reach carbon neutrality in agri-food supply chains. 80% of the mitigation potential from land use change is from stopping deforestation. Therefore, implementing the numerous zero deforestation commitments is an important element of the broader net zero targets, enhanced through due diligence regulation as underway at the EU level and repurposing agriculture subsidies as emphasized under the German G7 presidency this year. Now, we need more tools and platforms to translate these private sector commitments into action and impact. I think we will hear more about that later. At the same time, agriculture is one of the sectors at highest risk from the impact of climate change. We must develop greater resilience in agri-food systems to better respond to increasing climate shocks. This aspect is of particular importance for the African continent, where we are meeting today. If average global temperature rises by 2 degrees from pre-industrial levels, 189 million more people could be pushed into hunger and poverty. And SDG 2, life without hunger, might be almost unachievable. To that end, we need to scale up innovative and well-established practices to adapt agri-food systems to times of climate change, backed through adequate financing. Germany is ready to prove our solidarity to developing countries through support in addressing losses and damages, adapting to climate change and for their socio-economic development, notably in the field of agriculture. Therefore, in 2021, Germany increased its finance for adaptations to 2.59 billion euros, or 49% of Germany's total climate finance. And this is not just a recent development. The years before, we have undertaken more than 190 programs focusing on agriculture and adaptation to climate change with our different partners, mostly on the African continent. African countries are key partners in Germany's climate adaptation cooperation, for example, through our support for the Africa Adaptation Initiative, AAI, and the multi-donor program Adapting for Smallholder Agriculture. Now, I'm curious to hear more about the perspective and initiatives of our distinguished panelists and what we can do to move forward jointly. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anke. It's inspiring to hear also about Germany's commitment to the space, especially Africa. So in that sense, the topic of conversation that we're going to have right now fits very well. In particular, the themes of resilience and greenhouse gas emissions and how dealing in a potential 2% world, if we compare with pre-industrial levels, is becoming more and more apparent. And we need to look at issues regarding linkages on food system sustainability and their resilience to climate change. So with that, I have a question actually for Mr. George Odingo, and thank you for joining us, about given this important interlinkage between food system sustainability and their resilience to climate change, why is it so important to integrate food and climate action? Could you tell us more about the ambition behind the Climate Resilient Food Systems Alliance and how BRAC is currently advancing food systems resilience in climate change? So it's really the interest and about this interlinkages between food and climate action, and really share more about the work you've been doing around the Climate Resilient Food Systems Alliance. I'm looking forward to learning more.
Thank you. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here. This is a very important occasion, and of course for COP27, and in which climate change and food security are put together. Food which we eat is dependent on weather. It's dependent on rain. And the rain and all those aspects are influenced by the climate. So when we are talking about climate change or any deviation from climate, then it will impact very negatively on our food. Each and every one of us eats. You could be an engineer, you could be an architect, but all of us have one thing in common. We eat, and that food has to be grown somewhere. So we have to really look at food security and climate. And as you have just said, you mentioned agriculture is a contributor to greenhouse gases. So it's a cause, it's a victim, and I believe it should also be the solution. Agriculture should be the solution, because if you can start a vehicle and can let it to accelerate to go, you can also stop it. So all of us who are within the food systems, all the way from the input to the fork, have the ability to ensure that we change immediately. The greenhouse gases, the one which is in big question to us is carbon dioxide. And carbon dioxide, the balance between what is being produced and what is also, that is what is now affecting. That means there is a disbalance between the carbon dioxide in the air, which is now bringing all these things. So, as in BRAC, BRAC is an organization which was started in 1972 in Bangladesh after a catastrophe, and it has focused working with small-scale farmers on food security. All of you who know about BRAC, who know about Bangladesh, it was a basket case. BRAC, through the effort working with the government in Bangladesh, Bangladesh now is food sufficient because of the efforts which BRAC has been doing with the farmers and ensuring that there is sustainability in the production, there is sustainability within the systems. The most important thing which BRAC has worked on is to increase the productivity per unit land. By increasing the productivity ensures that farmers don't go beyond. So from that unit of land, you can get more. And that is something which is important. BRAC has been in existence for 50 years, and it has now moved out of Bangladesh, and it's now in other parts of the world. We are working now in 7 countries, actually 8 countries in Africa, and 3 more countries in Asia. And our focus is majorly to do on intensification of agriculture. We are working with the small-scale farmers so that they are food secure, they produce their productivity, link them to the market on a sustainable manner, using climate smart agricultural approaches. And this is very, very important. But as you move and linking them and they build their assets, you also need to consider that they need financial services. So as BRAC is building on productivity and giving capacity to the farmers, BRAC has also a microfinance component to ensure that there's sustainability for the farmers to do the saving and to do any other money they need. So financial services is critical for the small-scale farmers so that they improve on their dignity and work together. But the most important thing is to ensure that we do, that we have to do these things at scale. Small is beautiful, but scale is necessary. The number of farmers which have been reached in Bangladesh are in millions. In a small country like Liberia, we are working with over 85,000 farmers on poultry, on cassava, on rice, giving them and using methods which are ensuring that they use their land productively and reduce on greenhouse gases. So these are aspects which we are ensuring. Another area is that we have to ensure that there's microfinance services to go ahead with it, so that within the first 2 years, the farmers are able to save and to borrow as a group. And we build their capacity using the community structures. We use community agriculture promoters, livestock promoters within the community which are trained and linked with the Ministry of Agriculture to ensure that climate smart agriculture approaches and technologies are dispatched on a regular basis and linking them to the market. Thank you.
Mr. Odingo, thank you very much for your comments. I was taking notes. That's a practical thing of having the iPad along as you were sharing. And it's nice how you showcased agriculture as the cause, victim, and the solutions, and the very specific examples, whether it's coming from Bangladesh, but how you adapting them to the African country context. So really practical, and that's helpful. We need very practical solutions at this COP. It's the implementation COP. Thank you for those comments. And also just for everybody who's joining us online, please be aware that there is a major event happening next door, I think in the Children and Youth Pavilion, and it's very loud. As a mother of 2 children, I know why, but it's really fun. So just be aware of that. Speaking of our online audience, I would now like to talk to Dr. Kessie, and in particular, Dr. Kessie will be sharing with us methods to addressing resilience at the local level in supply chains, which links to the previous local examples. And my question would be, when working towards food security and supporting communities, why should we place a focus on more resilient local food supply chains? And how might we go about this? This is really it's $1 million question. So Dr. Kessie, looking forward to learning from you.
Hello, hello everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, if it's good morning, depending on where you're connecting from. Dr. Kessie from Tanzania. Yes, I would like to echo on what Jonathan said, that we all have a common thing. We all have to eat, and our food comes from our environment. The interaction with our environment then can be positive, can bring positive changes or negative changes to our planet. So looking at the Alliance, which is the Resilient Local Food Supply Chain Alliance, we are having this alliance because first we want to have a platform whereby we can share information, technical information, scientific information that will inform us on decision making in responding to the challenges of the climate change. Yes, climate change is real. We are seeing it. For instance, in our country, Tanzania, last season we had a change in rainfall pattern that disturbed a lot of farmers, and the harvest for this season has dropped almost to 10%. And what we experience right now is high prices of the staple food commodities. That is white maize, with beans, rice. The prices have doubled right now. So we can see how the impact is. And the most affected people, they are the people who are in the low income segment of the society. And most of them, you look at, we have the youth, we have women, we have the unemployed, so, and the community that lives in the rural area. Now, what is to be done then to address these issues? Looking at the way the rain patterns are going on, and also the forecast for the coming season also is not good, promising. We have also the rains will be below average in most of the areas. So what we are looking at now is to have the mechanism that we can harvest the rainwater. That's small irrigation infrastructures that will be based on at the village level. That since the rain patterns are not good, then we harvest the little water we have, then it can be used as supplementary irrigation to their crops, just at the village level. That will go down to the households, targeting the households. And we are also looking at soil health, that most of our soils are now degraded. Now, how to repair that health? We are working with the farmers, testing the status of the soil, and giving the proper advice on what is to be applied to the soil that we can maintain the soil health. We also strengthening the early warning system and delivery of the information to the farmers on how the season is going to perform. That is key for the farmers to be informed and take a proper decision. We have the issue of seeds. The seeds that can withstand or that can use a small amount of water. Those ones who are making them available to the farmers.
See, I can't hear you very well.
They can plant it timely and take the appropriate agronomic Hello?
Sorry, we couldn't hear
Hello,
you.
Claire?
Now we can hear you.
Hello, Claire. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay. So in summary form is that responding to the climate change, science has to lead, innovations has to lead, and the focus has to be the smallholder farmers and the households, and it has to be tailor-made to the specific agroecology. Thank you very much, Claire.
Thank you so much. We try to follow the points as good as possible, and they're very insightful around climate change is real. We can see it on the impact, such as rain patterns, and ultimately also the important role of science and knowledge and expertise to develop local solutions that make sense to farmers. I missed a lot, but I think the audience caught most of it, and thank you very much, Dr. Kessie. In that context, and with those specific examples that we have received right now, I would now like to turn to our other virtual participant, Mr. Pascal Liu. And Pascal and I know each other from a few conferences in which we've been together, but never in person. The topic is around moving from resilience of agri-food supply chains to reducing carbon emissions in agri-supply chains, which is an important aspect to reaching carbon neutrality. And the question, Dr. Liu, is what kind of challenges do you see for businesses to address responsible sourcing and reduce carbon emissions? This is especially applicable since you'll be followed by a business speaker. And what is FAO doing to help companies reduce their carbon footprint in global agri-food supply chains? Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Thank you for the questions, and good evening, everybody. Can you hear me well? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. If I know that the sound is going and coming, so if at some point you don't hear me anymore, please feel free to interrupt, and I will try to fix the problem, even though we might not have much control over it. Okay, so thanks for your question, Claire, and it's a pleasure to be with everybody of you tonight. So before we talk to the challenges of decarbonization and decarbonizing value agricultural supply chains, I think we should just spend a minute on the good news. The good news is that many industry initiatives are emerging, industry initiatives that can be at the company level or at the whole industry level or at a certain level of the supply chain, and of course also multi-stakeholder initiatives, which are important. An increasing number of agri-food companies pledge to reach net zero by a certain date, and then do make efforts to reduce GHG emissions in their own operations, and sometimes also they try to do the same considering their whole supply chains, even though this is much more challenging. And I think there are several drivers that explain this lots of good news. Of course, the rising awareness of climate change. Now everybody realizes it's a reality. It's hitting us, and it will hit us even harder in the future. Also, there's the new regulations and expected upcoming regulations. For example, the EU last February, I think most people know, they released a proposal that was approved by the European Commission on corporate sustainability due diligence. And as recently as today, the Biden administration in the US released their proposal for the Federal Supplier Climate Risks and Resilience Rule that would, force federal suppliers in the US to disclose their emissions and also to set targets for the largest ones, climate-related targets and emission-related targets. So I think this host of regulation, and there's more coming up on due diligence, mandatory due diligence, including environmental risks and climate risks, will come up in the coming years. And so businesses are anticipating this and taking action to adapt to these upcoming regulations. Also, there's been rising pressure by internal stakeholders in companies at the level of boards, but also at the level of managers and employees, and also external stakeholders, investors, customers, clients, consumers, etc. So companies are also aware that they need to look after their corporate image and their brand reputation, and so access to finance is at stake for them. And finally, very recently, since last year, there's the soaring cost of fossil energy, which is hitting many people very hard, but in a way, it's also an incentive for companies to decarbonize and to move to renewable sources of energies and thereby reduce their emissions. So this is the good news. But of course, we know there are challenges, many challenges, as you hinted, Claire. So first of all, global agri-food supply chains are long and complex. They can have up to hundreds of players, suppliers across dozens of countries, including countries where governance is weaker, where there's less statistical data. So it is challenging to only account, do the inventory of carbon and emissions, and not even talking about the reduction of emissions in long and complex supply chains. So companies struggle to define how to tackle their emissions in their supply chains, the so-called Scope 3 emissions, particularly the emissions of suppliers in low and medium income countries, where, as I said, there's not so much reliable information, and also there's governance issues in some of these countries. Also, and perhaps as a result of that, companies' plans and pledges often lack details. That's not the case for all companies, of course, but that's a tendency we see in terms of details on how they will reduce GHG emissions in their supply chain. And so the effectiveness of these plans and these pledges can be called into question. and it has been called to question by several groups. Also, companies often rely in their plans on offsetting and offsetting schemes, but the effectiveness and reliability of some offsetting schemes has also been called into question. And of course, there's a risk of greenwashing in some cases. I think today also the UN has released a report by its high-level expert group on the net zero emissions commitments of non-state entities. And it's also, try to highlight the issue of greenwashing and put forward some recommendation, to reduce greenwashing and also, to come to real concrete commitments that will have effects, net impacts. Then there's also the issue of multiple definitions, voluntary standards, methods, approaches that exist, to define carbon neutrality, to define emissions, etc., etc. What's the right methods to measure emissions in the agricultural sector? All this is, sometimes unclear for many companies, and it's also, I think, a constraint to the adoption of clear and effective plans. And then, since we talk about supply chains and global supply chains, there's the risks of negative impacts on small farmers and SMEs, small and medium enterprises, especially in developing countries, where companies and farmers are not equipped with the same resources as in more advanced countries and economies. And so new requirements from the downstream part of the supply chain, from major importing developed countries, could also have negative impacts on the suppliers from developing countries. So companies and countries need information, they need guidance on methods, on approaches, sources of assistance and sources of finance. And also there's a need for coordination. As I mentioned, there are a lot of interesting initiatives, but there's not much global coordination of these initiatives. So I think there's a need for harmonization of the definitions, the methods, the standards, and a need for more collaboration along agri-food supply chains vertically, from input suppliers down to retailers, and also at horizontal level at a given level of the supply chain, between supply chain operators and other key players like government institutions or civil society organizations or development institutions. So in short, there's a need for a global coordination mechanism for agri-food supply chains. As I mentioned, there are several global initiatives, but the problem is that none of them is really specific to the agri-food sector. There are very interesting initiatives at global level that try to tackle all sectors. There are initiatives also for specific agricultural industries, for example, dairy. But there's nothing really that global multi-stakeholder collaboration platform specifically for agri-food supply chains. So based on this, FAO is preparing the Global Agri-Food Climate Initiative, which will be an international collaboration platform to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions in global agri-food supply chains. Its objectives will be to help companies, producer organizations, and business associations to measure, reduce, and offset emissions, to coordinate efforts to create synergy and to maximize efficiency of private sector initiatives, to contribute thereby to a better governance of GHG quantification and reduction processes, and to support small producers and small and medium enterprises, especially in developing countries, to adapt to these new regulations and new demands by the market. So the platform we envision will have several roles. One would be to facilitate the access of supply chain operators to reliable information on strategies, approach, methods, and standards to measure and reduce emissions, to facilitate their access also to reliable technical and scientific expertise on measuring emissions and on carbon neutrality, to facilitate their access to technical assistance and support, and also to sources of finance to support their investment in GHG reduction. The platform's second main role would also be to facilitate collaboration vertically among the various operators of supply chains and from input suppliers to retailers. So it would be a full supply chain approach that would be adopted, but also horizontally between given supply chain operators and other external key players, be they governments or development association, academia, and civil society organizations. So we are aware, I feel, that this is quite an ambitious project, and so we need to take a gradual approach. We have to be realistic. So in the first phase, the focus would be on the identification and the quantification of the inventory of GHG emissions along supply chains, ensuring consistency with the processes of the UNFCCC and the IPCC. That's very important that we operate within the framework of the UNFCCC. And to discuss definition also of carbon neutrality, starting with selected industries within the agricultural sector, to start in a way which is, we start narrow and then we widen the approach to other industries. And when that's done, in the second phase, we would expand the scope of the platform to GHG reduction and offsetting, looking at offsetting processes and schemes, and also looking at carbon sinks as part of possible offsetting by companies. So the possible activities would include sharing practical experience, lessons learned, know-how and technology. That will be important, this sharing, because there's a wealth of information and experiences by companies that would be shared. Supporting the harmonization of definitions, terms, methods, and standards, building consensus on appropriate strategies and good practices, and playing a catalytic role for their faster dissemination and adoption by the industry worldwide. Increasing the capacity of supply chain operators from producers to retailers to measure and reduce their emissions. Stimulating the development of collective initiatives to design efficient solutions to reduce emissions and to increase carbon sinks in food supply chains. And mobilizing resources and helping channel them to the activities where their efficiency will be maximized. That's very important also, because there's a lot of climate finance mechanism, operational, but operators, especially SMEs, don't always know how to reach out to them. So in terms of possible beneficiaries and partners of the platform, there will be, of course, the companies along agri-food supply chains, but also trade associations, industry organizations, including SMEs and operators association in developing countries, farmer organizations, governments and public sector agencies, especially in developing countries, research, development, and training institutions, donors, public and private donors, and international financial institutions, CSOs, including consumer associations, environmental NGOs, climate action initiatives, and youth organizations, employers and worker organizations, and the UN agencies and other intergovernmental organizations. Of course, the platform would include and work in close collaboration with the relevant climate initiatives. I've mentioned, some of them at the start. There's many of them, and we are aware that it's important. Of course, the idea is not to reinvent the wheel or to build from scratch. We need to work in partnership with all the good work that has been done by a lot of organizations. The idea would be to develop synergies with these initiatives and maximize efficiency. And that would include, of course, the UN climate mechanisms and processes and relevant private sector initiatives. So in a nutshell, this is the idea for the platform. We hope to be able to launch the platform next year. But before closing, I also wanted to mention that FAO and the EBRD, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, have issued recently a new report that considers priorities for decarbonizing agri-food systems. It's titled Investing in Carbon Neutrality, Utopia or the New Green Wave, Challenges and Opportunities for Agri-Food Systems. And it's based on research and insights from various groups of stakeholders. So I will stop you and I will stop here and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. And by the way, congratulations. It's a major announcement and it's great to see more harmonization in the food system space. It's something that we're also working on a lot at WBCSD, and especially the Scope 3 area is a big area. Really appreciate the context you gave, especially around the challenges. What I would love to hear and learn a bit more about, and this wasn't part of the prepared, I'll obviously share the prepared question, but it's also the opportunity space, especially for companies that are or want to be leaders in addressing the climate agenda in the food system space. So with that, I have a question for Mrs. Aya Hietavuo, and it is really about how technology can be leveraged to reduce carbon emissions in supply chains and in packaging. And the question is the use of a technology and innovation, and I didn't see that innovation part, I just figured it based on the previous comments, about reducing greenhouse gas emissions in agri-food supply chains, and how can we leverage technology, and what has Tetra Pak been doing in the space?
Thank you so much, and it was super interesting to hear about the initiative from FAO, so very warmly welcoming these types of initiatives for multi-stakeholder collaboration. So just for those in the audience who may not know Tetra Pak so well, so Tetra Pak is originally a Swedish company, so we were founded 70 years ago, and some of you know us from packaging, which I think, for instance, here we have some drinks in Tetra Pak packaging, but in fact we are a company that has end-to-end solutions for the food systems. So we do have food processing technology, equipment, different type of services, including decarbonization, and then we have food packaging. And everything basically that we do is about food. So that's why we take our responsibility also very seriously, considering the current food crisis and what is happening and the need for really transformation in the food system. And maybe also I heard mentionings about the company's targets in terms of climate, and we've been one of the forerunners in actually with the science-based targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions in our company. So we were one of the first ones first to come up with those, and now we're one of the 60 who have long-term and short-term targets in this area. And we really, obviously, a key issue is our own reduction of climate impact, but the bigger impact that we have is, of course, through our products and solutions. And therefore, we believe we've identified 4 different pathways where technology, solutions, and companies like ourselves, which provide both industrial solutions, but also technical advice and things like packaging materials, can drive change in the food system transition. So first of all, the first one would be healthy food for a healthy planet. So that's one transition that we believe that needs to happen. I'll get more in detail into this, but just listing the 4. Second one would be food, addressing food loss and food waste. The third would be, in particular in our sector and for our company, it's responsible dairy. So the transitions needed in the dairy industry. And then the last one is really, it's about food packaging. What is sustainable food packaging? So starting with the first transition that we believe is going to be critical and where our industry really can play an enabling role is the transition to not only to food which is for a healthy planet, but also that makes it nutritional and good for people. And here, looking at alternative diets, which might provide that alternative proteins, and developing technologies, for instance, leveraging sometimes it's food waste, but it could be things like algae or fungi or new fermentation technologies, which provide that needed supply of food in countries where you may not have that currently. So that's obviously an area of major development and innovation to come up with those novel foods. Then the second area would be really to look at food loss and food waste. And there, the processing technologies of today, it's fair to say that they are fairly linear processes, and there's often a lot of waste actually in food production. So if you, for instance, could divert some of that waste into food for animals, or food for or feed for animals, or food for humans, that could drive huge reductions or avoided emissions in the food processing part, and it could provide, again, well-needed animal feed, for instance, in countries where you don't have that, or even fertilizers and other things. Then if we look into the dairy industry, which I think dairy is well represented here in this meeting, and also I know the FAO is closely working with the Global Dairy Platform, where we are also members. I think there's a lot of things that can be done, and some of the technologies that currently exist for food processing, for instance, could be adapted into the dairy farms, and we could create synergies and reduce emissions by creating cooperatives of small dairy farmers, for instance. And we have projects underway in many countries, including Africa, Asia, and in developing world, where we actually, as a company, we leverage the opportunities to bring those small dairy farmers together, creating cooperatives and providing technologies, training, and tools for making this happen. And then the last part, which I wanted to mention, because I think we're running out of time, aren't we? It's really about the role of packaging and food packaging. What is responsible food packaging? So in our company, what we have, and what's actually the foundation of the company, is technologies to actually, in terms of the filling and putting the goods into the packaging, it's called the aseptic technology. It means that it's a very quick heating technology, which actually allows for food to preserve in a package for a longer period of time without having any impact on the nutritional values of the food. And in current crises that we're living in, whether it's the food security issues, whether it's the war, whether it's been the pandemic, etc., this actually has a major impact in food waste, the amount of food waste, because you can actually preserve food for a longer period of time. There are other technologies as well, so we don't claim to be the only one here, but leveraging these technologies, making sure that when packaging is used in this context, also that it's getting recycled, and there are systems to address that. So all in all, these 4 pathways that are the ones that we have identified, and we believe that this could majorly provide solutions in the transition, and we really welcome collaboration with the different stakeholders, but also as an industry. And I know that the World Business Council is also going to have a role in this collaboration. So all collaboration is very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Aya. Really clear. 4 areas: healthy food for a healthy planet, food loss and food waste, responsible dairy, and innovation in food packaging. So really helpful. We got insight today on the local level, how we can support farmers on the ground, the importance of data, science and technology. We also got information on what's happening on the global level and what the global multilateral system is advancing in the space, especially on the climate and food agenda. And we heard on what the private sector is doing. So we managed to cover a lot in 52 minutes. We have 8 minutes to go. And I would love to just open up briefly for questions, because it would be a shame if we don't have some questions. Yes, wonderful. Thank you. Yes.
Hello.
I think you can just speak in it. It should work.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. This is Samira. I'm Samira.
Closer.
Put it closer to my mouth. You can see I'm totally inexperienced in this. I'm Samira Hotobadjuring, and I lead the Resilient Local Food Supply Chains Alliance, and we had Dr. Kessie speaking on our behalf. My own question is, and we do work with FAO as well, Pascal. Sylvie is on our team. But I was just interested about looking at the linkages between the global supply chains and local supply chains, because our focus is at local supply chains and building resilience at the local level, and we think that is where it supports farmers more directly, especially farmers who are at the coalface, if you like, who bear the brunt of climate issues. So I'd like to hear a little bit more. Maybe this might not be the area, but I'd just like to know a little bit more about how you see that. Maybe not a long answer, but maybe just something quickly.
So,
Pascal,
it's you. Very brief.
Yes.
Global and local, a few minutes, and then I'll finish us off. A hard question,
Sure.
2 minutes.
Yes, thank you for your question, Samira. And absolutely, I mean, local supply chains are often the start of the global supply chains, as you know, I suppose very well. So this initiative that I mentioned is highly relevant to local supply chains also, even if they end up marketing the products, in a given country. I think we have to look into this also. And I think also you mentioned resilience, so probably the question is more for Dr. Casey, on the resilience aspect of local supply chains. Over from me. You see, it was very brief.
Thank you for that answer. We have a gentleman here who wanted to also make a comment, but we don't have translation services, so it's something to be working on in the future. Yes, there's another question.
Thank you. Thank you for the speakers for the useful information. My name is Marta. I'm a sustainability manager at Kernal. It's an agriculture company in Ukraine. We are the largest producer of sunflower oil in the world, and we've actually been working very productively over the last year on identifying the business opportunities associated with decarbonization of supply chain. Working closely with our trade partners, trying to identify a business case in terms of actually producing the low carbon agriculture commodities and making it a case in point, which is why I was really happy to hear what Pascal mentions, because it reassured me that we're moving in the right direction. But the question I have is quite practical to Pascal. Do you feel like the global agriculture commodity markets are prepared to talk pragmatically about the low carbon commodities, and in terms of also discussing the price premiums? And if you have any cases that you could point out to what you have experienced? And the second question, if you could repeat the name of the initiative that you mentioned, the platform the FAO has been working on, and whether companies like mine can contribute or participate. Thank you.
Pascal, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you for your questions. I'll start with the easiest, the second one. So the name of the initiative is Global Agri-Food Climate Initiative. And yes, of course, your company is very much welcome. All companies are welcome in this multi-stakeholder platform. And we will follow up, of course, if you would like to leave your contact details to the organizers in the pavilion, we will be very happy to follow up with you once the platform is more advanced. Coming back to the first question, I think the blunt answer is no. I think the markets right now, if you talk about today, the markets are not prepared, or few markets are prepared to give a premium for low carbon commodities. But I think the market are preparing themselves to be prepared, hopefully very soon, because increasingly, they realize that there will be some incentives given to this type of commodities. We saw, for example, in the case of organic products, it took a very long time. It took decades for organic farming products. But now, in the EU, in the US, in Japan, in other countries, where there's a national certification scheme, there are nationally agreed and approved labels, originally approved labels, like in the case of the EU. There's a market and there's price premium for organic products. And I expect, having worked in certification schemes, voluntary sustainable certification schemes for over 20 years at FAO now, I really believe that that's the roads that low carbon products will follow. Just to give you an example to encourage you, Marta, at the moment with colleagues, we've been working on a carbon footprinting tool to calculate the carbon footprint of fruits like bananas and pineapples that are being exported. And we are now working on a pilot blockchain application so that we can communicate down the value chain, down the supply chain, to the markets, to the customers, in a way which respects the integrity and the chain of custody. We can communicate what products are certified or not. And we are working exactly on this, trying to convey down the supply chain, down to customers, information in a safe way, integral information on products that have been produced, using methods, low carbon methods. Over, thank you.
Thank you. And I think this final question and the answer shows the value of these panels. We are out of time. I love is it okay? But I promised everyone to finish because Aya has a taxi to catch. So I wanted to finish on time. It's just that the value of these conversations, we can exchange contact information, but we're not just here to exchange and learn from each other, but to also build relationships and collaborate and drive work forward. Thank you. Thank you to our keynote speaker. Thank you to our panelists. We really appreciate the collaboration.
Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you, everybody.